Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am here today with Jonny Mac. We spoke before. It's probably a year and a half, maybe even 2 years since we spoke last time, right?
I think so.
Yeah, well, welcome, Jonny. Happy to have you.
Oh, well, it's great to be back. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so, you were actually on my list since the idea of renaming the podcast came about. Because when we spoke last time, I basically made a mental note that you are a very thoughtful builder who was very careful to jump into building things. And then, before you pivot into any other direction, you take your time and basically think about stuff. And it's not like rushed decisions. And it felt like it would be great to hear how you guys got into Spandex. Now I remember the name, and aggregation, even though, as we talked about just a minute ago, it's all finance, but it's a different type of finance, very different type of distribution channels and everything.
Yeah,
Happy to
absolutely.
have you.
Yeah, thank you. So the last time we spoke, I think we were working on HyperSub,
Yeah.
which was like a creator platform wherein creators could charge a subscription for access to their content and to private groups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we had a good run. We had, I think our growth was kind of downstream of the Farcaster ecosystem growth, and it was great for a little while. And then I feel like the meta, kind of shifted away from us, and it caused our team to sort of take a big step back and really think like from first principles. Okay, what are we doing? What do we believe? Building the past couple years, we've sort of observed this like sort of crypto ecosystem has kind of the memory and attention span of a goldfish, wherein it jumps into some new thing, it'll try the new thing for a little while, and then their attention shifts to the next new shiny thing. And we were like, look, we want to kind of emancipate ourselves from this highly volatile, highly cyclical, like, cycle. And so we started, and I think around that time, maybe like Stripe had acquired Bridge, and that was like a bomb that went off, I think, for us and a lot of other founders. Were like, whoa, what is going on here? What are these use cases? Where is this growth? And so we took a step back and we started thinking a lot about like, okay, what do we want to do? We could spend the next year like continuing to build out HyperSub, and we could probably keep growing, but like to what end? Like, do we see this getting, materially bigger? Like, is this a venture scale opportunity?
Right.
And I think that our conviction, not just in HyperSub specifically, but really in the category generally of like Web3 creator tools, we just sort of like lost conviction. We were just like, we don't see it. We don't see how this is going to be materially better than what's already there, like what already exists.
Yeah.
And the things that actually are materially better are like the core financial primitives of crypto. So for example, I talked to a lot of like Patreon creators, and they'd be like, well, how is this different from Patreon? And we'd say like, well, you own the payment rail. You have a direct, economic relationship, with your user base, and it's yours. You own it. It's not mediated by some third party. You have net zero payments. You don't have any chargebacks. You have cross-border payments. And what I realized I was pitching was like not so much HyperSub as just like, crypto as like a financial primitive.
Yeah.
And then we had built all this sort of, product in interface layer on top of that, which wasn't actually that appealing to them, And so it just caused us to like take a big step back. And so we looked at a lot of different things. We looked at lending, we looked at payments, we looked at stable coins, we looked at DEXs, we looked at various sort of components of the DeFi stack. We looked at issuance, like RWAs, and even like a better, meme coin launchpad. And like ultimately where we landed, I was reading this great book called How the Internet Happened. And it's about,
It's a good one.
it's really good. It's every chapter in the book, it kind of covers the origin story of like an iconic internet company like PayPal, eBay, Google, Facebook, etc. And one of the observations the author has is he talks about the dot-com crash and how despite all of these stocks massively contracting and basically the entire economy of the San Francisco startup scene just collapsing to zero, the internet usage, like global internet usage, continued to just skyrocket. And it reminded me a lot of crypto. It reminded me how as we have these cyclical expansions and contractions, we have these trends that emerge and then dry up really fast, but overall usage increases, but it's in very specific verticals. Yeah, so like transfers, swaps, particularly swaps, are like up year over year and have been for a long time. And so we're like, all right, well, that's interesting. That's like maybe there's so much fakery and lies and fraud in crypto. There's so much wash trading. Like it's so hard to tell if what you're looking at is real. And I feel like the kind of like entrepreneurial signals, you know, that one might use to orient and as inputs on their decision making are basically broken in crypto. But this felt like looking at swap volume, we were like, okay, this is maybe not fake. You know, this is probably real. And so we started looking into swaps, and that's kind of how that was like the beginning of our journey to where we are now. So I'm happy to keep talking and tell you more kind of like once we landed on like, that was sort of like our process leading up to like, what should we work on next? Mm-hmm. And then once we landed on swaps, we were like, okay. And then that was another like few months before we really like were fully oriented.
Right. So maybe, you know, I would like to hear more about the timeline because, you know, when we spoke last time and, you know, one of the most visible periods for you on Farcaster was, you know, when you guys worked on HyperSub and it was used on Paragraph and for some time also on like channels before they became again the second class citizen. So how long did that take to sort of realize that it's not going to work this way? Because I think we all kind of hoped that, you know, the Farcaster degen wave will come back with something else.
Yeah.
And I know from my own experience that, you know, sometimes it's just easier starting something new, but it's very hard to let go something you worked on and something which I think at that period of time when we talked about this, it felt like it had its PMF in a sense. People were excited about it, you know, people talked about it, people used it, and it was processing decent amount, given the size of Farcaster, obviously, and Paragraph and everything. What was the timeline, you know, when you guys realized this is not going to work and we will have to, you know, cut the ropes and start something else?
I think so. The peak was probably like FarCon 2, and then we had maybe another 2 months, I want to say, of like really strong growth, like really strong month over month growth where it looked like, okay, this is really working. So basically from, I want to say it was like February to April, May, I would say was like of 2024. That was like a up only period. And it was not just us, it was like everybody, like every, you know, like Farcaster itself, and then all of the apps that were kind of being built in and around the Farcaster ecosystem were all high growth. And I think degen was like a big part of, I think degen was like the engine of that growth because it was this massive wealth event, you know, like a lot of people made a lot of money. And so it attracted a lot, and it was all happening on Farcaster. And so I think that caused a lot of people to go check it out. And so there was a lot of growth, and that benefited everyone kind of in the ecosystem that was building. And that had other cool, genuinely useful things to offer. So, but by, I would say May, June, it was like, okay, this isn't growing anymore. And whatever, I mean, like that's not the end of the world if you have like a down month. But then it was like July, we had another down month. And then there was like this, like Pump Fun had really started to gain a lot of steam, and like the whole meme coin meta started to like really pop off, while at the same time like degen kind of started to wane, and the Solana ecosystem started was really gaining steam. And so it just felt like the winds had shifted, and
Yeah.
like a lot of the growth kind of just dissipated, and the capital and the people kind of went elsewhere. And that's always a risk, I think, when you sort of, there's that saying that never build your castle in someone else's kingdom. Like, I think
That's
it's
true.
always a risk that when you're downstream of somebody else's growth, if they stop growing, you stop growing. And that was kind of a bet. But I think we viewed Farcaster really as kind of a go-to-market strategy more than anything else, and always knew that we're going to have to, have a footprint outside of it. And I think, so by that summer, I was like, all right, let me start to, reach out to creators on other platforms, and really start to come up with a plan for how we can grow outside of the Farcaster ecosystem. And then as I did that, and the more creators I spoke to, I was just like, I don't think our value proposition is there. Like, I'd go through the list of ways in which we're differentiated, and it felt like we were like 10% better on 10 different things, which sort of just collapsed to being about 10% better. And
Right.
people don't switch when you're just when like there's marginal benefit. And so that summer was like when we were like, I was like, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. And furthermore, I don't think there's anything that we can do. Like, I don't think there's any
About
change
it.
that we can make to this product that's going to like get us to the next level that we need to get to. And so there was a very painful, like, I don't know, few weeks, probably two weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like along that line, where I was like, oh, we've worked so hard to get, to where we are, and we do have an audience, and we do have a user base, and there's like decent amount of volume going through the protocol every month, like, and I just, it was like, it took me a while to like fully accept what was happening, and to start thinking about what's next. Yeah, that was rough. But I'd say but the other thing is that like this job, like being a founder and being an employee in an early stage company and making these kinds of decisions, like, it's not always easy, it's like, I mean, it's, to be honest, it's like, it's hard, it's a hard job. And there's a lot of aspects of it that suck and that are not fun. My joke is like, it's, it's the worst job I've ever had, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
Right.
But it's like, so we had to just kind of accept it, just like be
So was
brutally.
everybody in the team okay with that? It's like, were people on board? Have they seen the
Well,
same thing you do?
yeah, so it was like me and my co-founder Danny, I think, were the first ones to kind of start having these conversations, and then we started thinking about like, what's next. And so by the fall of 2024, that's when we were like, all right, we were like pretty much fully committed to pivoting. It's just a question of like, to what?
Right.
And that's where we started having these discussions around like, okay, what is a durable market? What's real? What's a good fit for our team? A lot of other teams at that time were either selling, shutting down, like leaving crypto altogether, or
Yeah.
pivoting to something else. And so we were like, look, this is, we were thinking about the same things. And ultimately we just decided like, we actually genuinely believe in crypto. We believe in like democratized access to capital. And, even our very first product that we ever built was a crowdfunding product. And it was so similar to a lot of the like meme coins and scene coins and app coins that sort of came, 2 years later, wherein we're like, look, we're all about this idea that you can contribute to something and then share in its upside. And like the HyperSub, the way that we built rewards and the way that like ownership worked in HyperSub was really like a reiteration of that idea, but in a different form factor. So the core principles, like the core fundamentals of crypto, I think have always been like, we've been like ideologically aligned with. And so we were like, no, we're not going to leave. We actually genuinely believe in this technology and its capacity to do good in the world. And we have this very specialized set of skills. Like, we know how to write contracts. We know how to build good protocols and good products on top of them. like we're gonna stay and we're gonna keep building. But yeah, like I said, then it was just like, okay, great, like now what? Like what are we gonna build? And yeah, we just kind of went down the rabbit hole with swaps. Like we got really into the first sort of
So
entry
it's
point.
interesting. Before you go into the details,
Yeah.
answer me one question. And that's coming from someone who thinks finance is boring. It's like after all these years in crypto, I'm sure there were countless teams which worked on swaps. It's like, what have you seen on swaps that haven't been done or was done wrong?
It's a good question. Yeah. So I think what got us really excited is that if you break down a swap, there's a few component pieces of the swap. So there's the first thing is a quote, right? And so it takes time to get a quote. And it's actually takes like a long time to get a quote.
Okay.
That was our first indicator, like, okay, there's room for improvement here, just like looking at latency. Then what happens is you get your quote and you go to execute it. And the delta between what you thought you'd get and what you actually got can be pretty big for a number of reasons, which to us just feels like just like a profoundly bad experience to like an end user. But I feel like most people who work in crypto just kind of accept that that's how it works. And so they don't realize like how bad it is. And so for us, we were like, there's opportunity there to fix it. And then the third thing was like the business model of swap infrastructure. A huge part of it is positive slippage, which really is like, I think, a profoundly fucked up dynamic, because if you take a step back, like, and look at what's actually happening, you have a swap provider, like an aggregator, who has, you are giving 100% of your order flow to. And their business model, literally how they make money, is on the delta between what they quote you and what they actually execute. And so their revenue is literally proportional to how inaccurate they are. And so you have to ask this question, like, how much of the inaccuracy that we see is intentional? And so if you step back, you're like, okay, swaps have been growing year over year. It is the second most common on-chain action after transfer. It is the first and last thing you will ever do on-chain. And execution matters. Like, execution really matters. If the previous three things are true, then execution matters. And it matters more the more size you do and the more volume you do. And so we're like, well, do we think that this trend will continue? Do we think there will be more volume, like more trade volume, and just more volume in general across lending, across asset issuance, trading, payments, like swapping between things is so fundamental to assets on chain. So we're like, yes, we think it will grow materially. We're like, okay, well, there's a lot of room for improvement here, like a ton of room for improvement. We could be way faster, we could be way more accurate, and we could have much, much better pricing.
There you go.
And like, if we could achieve those things, would we have a successful business? Would we be creating value for others? And we're like, yes, 100%. And we felt that with like in our bones, like 100%. We'll bet our whole company on this being true. And so that's when we were like, all right, we're going to go all in on swaps. We're going to go all in on aggregation and making execution as good as it can possibly be. Because at the end of the day, this is like money that, like the incentives are really fucked up. Like it's
sounds like a banking,
It's a really bad arrangement when like you benefit off of like users getting worse execution. Like that's bad, And if we want and I think it's been fine for this like adolescent period of crypto, but if we want to like grow up and be a serious industry that's taken seriously by the rest of the world, like that is not going to work, And so it just felt like when we looked at like lending, we were particularly interested in like under collateralized lending, but really that's the underwriting problem, which we don't have any background on. So we were like, that's a big opportunity, but it's a bad fit for our team. And then a similar thing with like RWAs and stablecoins and payments, where like those are going to obviously be like humongous categories, but we don't have the skill set, nor do we have the network to really like make meaningful progress in those categories. And also too, we're like, I was like, I don't ever want to compete with Stripe. And so I was just like, it kind of it looked pretty obvious even to us at the end of 2024. If Stripe could use crypto rails to remove, the interchange fees, that would be an obviously huge thing for them, because most of their that's a significant piece of the 2.9% fees. And so we were just like, payments, RWAs, all that stuff, it just felt like equally as big, but not right for us and our team and our unique skill set. And so that's kind of gave us even more conviction to really like double down on aggregation. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. No, it's interesting thought process. Obviously, team problem fit is a big thing, which people sometimes ignore. So it feels like it definitely made sense for you. Was it hard to go back to the beginning?
Yeah. Oh, it was so hard. It was like the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah, it was. I mean, I feel like so much of your self-worth as a founder is in building things and shipping them, and
success of a product, right?
Getting customers and growing and so if you're not doing that, it's like, well, what are you? What do you even, it's so, and then the other thing is that, and I don't know, maybe more of a nuanced take, but like, I feel like so much of the like startup founder, like hustle porn is like, launch and iterate, build in public, just make something small and just get it out there, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I think there was definitely a time and place where that obviously worked, but I don't know. I feel like attention spans nowadays are, really, really short. And there's so many people building things that, it's highly competitive. And I don't think that you can build. I think the days of being able to build a really crappy product and then being able to still get customers and traction and early adoption, like I think that time has passed. I don't think we live in that time anymore. And then
I am glad you are saying that, because you said it during our first conversation as well.
okay, yeah, I feel like a lot of other founders and VCs and like people would maybe disagree with me on that, but it's just my observation. And the teams, I think it's very easy to burn yourself out and to sprint making 20 different products, and you never ship anything good. You never ship anything meaningful. And I think building good things takes time. And so and building infrastructure, especially building critical infrastructure, takes a lot of time. And so that was hard. That was like hard for me, and I think hard for our team to basically just unplug. Yeah, to be quiet, to kind of have radio silence while we just focused and built for, I mean, it was over a year. We didn't really do it. We were just heads down, focused and grinding for like a year, just quietly before we launched. So it was hard. Yeah.
Was it that long?
Yeah.
So I have two comments, one question, one comment actually on that. I totally agree. I think your feeling and comment about launching crappy products is probably more true today than it was when we spoke last time, because the longer we go with this internet, crypto and everything, and the easier it gets to launch something, it basically means we are all kind of saturated with things. And the idea of launch and iterate was originally meant for things like validating the category or validating a demand or something. But if you are launching, 101st thing of whatever it is, we already know there is a demand. We already know people want it. They even pay for it. It's just a question, do they want to pay you?
Yeah.
And that is really hard to validate with a crappy product, because that usually means they don't want to pay you. So yeah, I totally agree with that. But my question was more, so you just mentioned it was hard to basically unplug and focus. Didn't you guys really miss it? Because it felt like, HyperSub was kind of like a B2C, we would say, in the old world. And obviously, aggregator DEX is kind of like a B2B product.
Yeah.
Yeah, with very specific audience. So haven't you missed the crowds a
No,
little bit?
not really.
No?
I mean, I think that I just got sort of sick of all the bullshit. Like, I mean, we're like, we're here to build a business, and to make money and grow. I'm not here to like, I mean, I have made friends, but that's not why I'm here. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
I'm not here to build a social circle or to make friends or to travel the
Right.
world and go to conferences and party. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here to fucking win. That's what I'm here for. And so I don't, for a long time, it looked like the opportunity was in B2C, kind of at the, 21, 22, 23. It looked like, oh, there's a real market here for consumers. I think that's not true. I think that like
Totally agree.
consumer, like I think this notion of like a consumer crypto user, like I don't think that's real. I think that there's B2B, there's infrastructure, and there's airdrop farmers, and there's gamblers. There's like degenerate gamblers, and I think like, but the idea that you're gonna have some sort of like the same sort of person that uses like Reddit, or Instagram or whatever, like that they're gonna use a crypto product. I don't think that's real. And so it was. The hard part to me was like I like building things and launching things and making product and putting them out there and have it and seeing them grow and making them grow. That's what I love to do. And it was hard not to keep doing that, especially coming off the backside of HyperSub, which had some success, But, I think the flip side of that was like, well, the world has changed. Like this industry has changed. What we thought was real is not in fact real, and we're adapting. And we're going to make some piece of critical infrastructure materially better. And so that was kind of like the consolation prize, it's less like, well, we're on the path. And I feel like, remember at FarCon 3 I went to in New York, and I was like talking to other founders about this then. And they were like, dude, what are you talking about?
They didn't believe you.
Like I don't see what you see. And I remember thinking like, well, one of us is wrong, like either I'm totally wrong and I'm like just too doomer about this whole category, or it's the inverse. I saw, I actually kind of like removed the veil from my eyes, like, 9 months prior to everybody else, and it's like they're gonna catch up. And I feel like, I don't know, here we are now a year or two later, and it feels kind of like I'm happy with the decision we made, because I really I don't see any consumer usage at all. I think you either need to be in issuing assets, you need to be in transferring assets, or you need to be in swapping assets. I feel like those are the three real categories of crypto that are like real. So that would be like some kind of issuance, like RWA, meme coins, debt, whatever, like you're issuing some kind of token, you're doing payments, or you're doing
Clear.
swaps, and that's it. I think those are the only, and those are all core financial use cases. And if you're not doing something like along those lines, trading is obviously another big one, but like if you're not doing something along those lines, I just don't think there's a market. Now that's not to say that there won't ever be one. Maybe there will be, but it's just like, then you get into this question of like timeline. And it's like, the only timeline I care about is like the timeline of our runway. That's it. If you have infinite runway and you want to build towards some charismatic future, good for you. That you should do it.
You might get
But
bored. Like
we have to live in the reality of our timeline. And so that's all I can see. And so for as far as I can see, I'm like, those are the use cases that matter.
Right. Well, I think that makes your decision even more interesting because, you made it at a time where a lot of people still didn't understand what's happening, I think. To be fair, I think a lot of people still don't believe or don't want to accept what's happening. I think I've been saying it for long enough that, if we don't really build anything interesting here, the only thing which will happen is somebody with users will come, they will swap their old rails for crypto rails, and the users will never notice. So there will be a lot of users, but they're just not going to be yours because someone else will bring them in. And I feel it myself, even though I like trying new things. I think we are maybe even genetically wired for one network. Mm-hmm. So if you keep building the 101st thing, and we have to swap, change the apps to talk to different people, post on different places, go, solve your finance on 10 different places, it's just annoying. Even if you like the industry, it's annoying. And so whoever fixes that will basically win, which is not ideal, because I think the winners are not really going to be decentralized, whatever. But, that's, I think, where we are heading. So, okay. So now we know that you guys settled on a new direction. So tell me more about Spandex. Why is it so special? What you guys did in there?
Yeah, I will. So the first thing that we set out to build and that we did build is our own aggregator, which we call the Fabric aggregator. And just to kind of like break down what that is. So when you want to complete a trade, you will source the liquidity for that trade on a DEX. So Uniswap or Arrow or something like that, right? You've got all of these different pools that have liquidity. And so if you have ETH and you want USDC, then you would just go to the ETH USDC pool on Uniswap, and you would give it ETH and you would take the USDC. And that's like the simplest, most naive way to just to go to a DEX for the liquidity of the trade that you want to complete. But if you want to have an optimal trade, so like when you do that, so when you go and you take the naive approach, you're going to pay a little bit in slippage because the state of the network may change in between the time that you get your quote and you execute. And there's also going to be price impact, which is basically the degree to which your trade moves the price because of its impact on the liquidity of the pool, which that would be called price impact. And so if you have a large trade or a high volume of trades and you want to minimize these things, you would break up the swap, you'd break up the trade across multiple DEXs. So that's called routing. So you would route your trade. And there's like a mathematically optimal way to do that. So you're minimizing slippage and price impact. And so that's what an aggregator does, is they maintain an index like of all these different pools in all of these different venues, and they can compute the optimal path between an input token and an output token. You also have this use case where if you have, token A, but you want token C, but there is no token A, token C pair, like directly. So you have to go from A to B and from B to C in order to go from A to C. And so again, like that's non-trivial engineering work to maintain that database and then to compute the like optimal path between pairs so that you're providing the most efficient trade possible to the end user. So this whole category of things is called DEX aggregation. And there's a lot of companies that do it. And some of them are fast, some of them are slow, some of them are accurate, some of them are inaccurate. Some of them have really good pricing, some have really bad pricing. You see a fairly large range of performance. So what we picked when we were building our aggregator is we picked these 4 separate dimensions, which we refer to as SLAP, which is stability, latency, accuracy, and price. Stability refers to error rates and reversion rates of the API. Latency is time to quote. Accuracy is the delta between the quote and the execution, whether simulated or realized. And then price is input token relative to output tokens compared to peers. And so what we did is we built this public benchmarking tool wherein we took everyone's APIs and our own, and we put them into this simple interface, and we ran these rounds every 5 minutes to measure our performance against theirs. And initially we were like bad at everything. We were bad on all 4 dimensions. And that's how we made the product better, is that we would just, we were checking that pretty continually to be like, okay, how do we get more stable? How do we get faster? How do we become more accurate? How do we improve our pricing? And so that was like this iterative loop that we were on for like a year. And then finally we got to the point where we're like, well, we're pretty competitive across all 4 dimensions. Like we're much better actually than pretty much everybody else on all of them. And so we were ready to go to market. And so we started talking to developers and we were asking them, hey, what are you doing for swaps? Who do you use? And what's your setup? And we kept hearing the same story over and over again, where they'd say, well, we use this provider for this thing, but then we also use this other provider for this like cross-chain thing. And then we've just added another provider because they have support for this other network or this set of tokens or whatever. And so we'd say, well, why don't you use like one of the big meta aggregators that are out there? Because they've kind of solved this problem. They've like bundled everybody into one thing and made that thing available just in a simple API. And they'd say, well, those are expensive and slow. They're pretty slow. And so we heard this enough where we were like, okay, we need a go-to-market strategy for our own aggregator. And when we talk to developers, what we hear is that they kind of have their own kludgy solution to like a meta aggregator, but it's not really what they want to be doing. It's like kind of a mess. We were like, this is really kind of a classic use case for open source software, where if you hear the same problem being solved repeatedly, but in this bespoke way every single time, it's like, just like, this is what open source libraries are literally for, is that you can just solve the problem once really well and then give it away for free so that that becomes kind of the standard by which people meet the need. And so we were like, well, that would be really valuable if we did it. That would certainly solve people's problems. And it would create value. But then if we bundled our aggregator, the Fabric aggregator, into the open source set of other aggregators, then that would create value for us as well. It would allow us to capture some value because it would give our aggregator order flow. Right. And so that's what Spandex is, where it's we took our aggregator and a whole bunch of other aggregators, and we bundled them into this open source library that's free, that anyone can use to solve this problem of like highly efficient swaps across all chains and tokens. And
there you go.
And so developers started seeing this and be like, wow, this is really clever. Like, you're actually solving a problem for me. And what the other thing that it does is it forces the aggregators in the set to compete on a per swap basis. So in order to win flow, you have to be better every single swap than the next aggregator. So it sort of changes the like vectors of competition. Like right now, I think the name of the game for a lot of aggregators is, BD deals, wherein you can basically get a monopoly on the order flow. And once you've locked that in, you're not really subjected to competitive pressure. Like you don't have to be, you've already captured the order flow. So they're going to just get what they get. So if you're taking positive slippage, if you're not the most accurate, if you have high error rates or reversion rates, it's like, well, whatever, you have a monopoly on the flow, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. With Spandex, that really changes the dynamic amongst the aggregators. Now the aggregators are only going to win order flow when they're better, So it's like this pure meritocracy among aggregators on a per swap basis, where in order to win the flow and capture the fee, that was pretty obvious to a lot of developers, and it was like obviously better. And so many of them, that we're talking to have switched, like Clanker switched. We had early adoption from a company called Rift, Auto. There's like a number of developers that were just like, oh yeah, this is clearly better, and they switched to it. And then there's a bunch of other companies that we've been talking to that, are like, oh yeah, this is awesome. We really like this. It's not a priority today, but as soon as we optimize our swap infrastructure, we're going to switch to Spandex. So that's like that's what it is and who it's for and kind of how it's better. And then separate for companies, for larger companies that do want to maintain their own aggregation stack, wherein they're fetching quotes from multiple providers, for those companies, we're just basically pitching the Fabric aggregator. We're just like, oh, look, Spandex isn't really relevant to you because you already have your own finely tuned stack that you actually do want to maintain. And so that's when we're like, look, we are materially better than everybody else. Here's the benchmarking data.
Here's proof.
Yep. And so we're seeing pretty good, traction there as well for companies that care a lot about execution. Not everyone does, and it makes sense if you don't have a lot of volume or if your users aren't trading in size. It's like the marginal improvements in execution are probably not worth the development time, even though it only takes, I don't know, hours to implement to add another aggregator. But I think if you're doing size, and you have a lot of volume, then it adds up. Like one thing I like to say is, or it's a quote that I really like, is a small thing repeated is not a small thing.
That's true. Yeah. So basically you did this open source Spandex thing like a Trojan horse to get into smaller accounts, which would be hard to sell, one by one probably. Okay.
That's
really
the
nice.
whole point. That's the Trojan horse analogy is a good one. But it's a benefit in the sense that it's controlled by the developer, So and this is what's so great about it is you don't have any vendor lock-in, and if an aggregator goes down, it's highly fault tolerant. Like you'll just route a trade to the next aggregator. Like it's like strictly better from a developer's perspective because you're not locked into any one vendor, and also because if there's outages, if a provider goes down, you just route to the next one. Swaps, I think, are critical infrastructure for many apps. Like that's how they make their money, and so they really can't go down. But if you look at the stability for a lot of these APIs, they're not great. So that's where it's like the sum of all the aggregators will always, have a higher level of performance than any one aggregator.
Okay, well, that's pretty cool. I think, I'm just looking at the Spandex website now.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you guys launched it was February, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's still fairly new. Seems like the reception is positive. So what's in the store for, Fabric and Spandex in 2026? What are like the big milestones you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I think for us, just like with everybody else, our number
to
one
survive.
Yeah, like our number one goal is to get more order flow. Right. So so that's it. That
give me the ballpark. I'm totally unaware. So what is decent volume in swap terms for people?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a dashboard that I look at all the time. Okay. I have some dashboards on DeFi Llama. So, I mean, like just some numbers, so mainnet, so DEX aggregator volume. So all the volume from all of the DEX aggregators on mainnet was just under $22 billion on mainnet.
Okay. Is it like daily, monthly, weekly?
That's monthly. Okay. So about $22 billion last month. On Base, It was just under $5 billion, and Arbitrum, it was just over $2 billion. So those are the and that's like all of it. So for us, our goal is to get to 100 million, which is honestly, as far as DEX aggregators go, that's not a lot. I think once we went from 0 to 1, so that was good. And then we went from 1 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to a million. We're just about to get to 10 million. And so the next milestone obviously is 100 million. And I think that the way that we do that is by continuing to do what we're doing, which is be better, literally be better. Like we have to be faster. We have to be more accurate, and we have to provide better pricing. And if we can do that consistently and observably, then people will switch. That's one thing I really like about finance is if you can save people time or money, they will use you.
That's true.
It's just hard to do that.
Yeah.
So that's our goal for 2026. So, and the way that we'll do that is, continuing to focus on just our core engine or our core infrastructure and expanding to more chains. So the effort on the team is really divided into two categories. One is engineering and then the other is sales.
So what chains do you cover right now, guys?
So we're on Base, Arbitrum. We're launching on Tempo shortly. So Spandex supports Tempo, but the Fabric aggregator specifically will support Tempo here shortly as well. And then after that will be mainnet. So those are all things we expect to do in the next 3 months, I would say. And then we'll just continue expanding to more chains and then increasing our win rates on the chains that we're on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. Seems like a lot of work. There's a lot of chains.
It's so much work. If there was an easier way to make money, then I would prefer that. But until we figure that out, it's going to be DEX aggregation for us. Yeah. It's hard, but you know what? I will say, it really is a good fit for our team, and it's an area that we do genuinely enjoy. We're good at it, but we also keep learning, and keep improving. The scale of the opportunity is really exciting to us, and the game of winning, the game of winning trades and being more performant is fun. The sales part is hard. Outbound sales, I feel like is every morning you wake up and just eat a shit sandwich. It's pretty hard. Most people don't want to be sold to. So I feel like that's something that I've been trying to get better at. Is sort of selling without selling.
I think you have a thing which kind of is for selling without selling. Honestly, it's really, I think, if you skip the open source part, which is good for smaller teams and probably smaller tools, the other part is basically just people have to trust you. So it's not really about what you do, but who you do it with.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be natural for you because you are, a good communicator and you enjoy talking to people. So
thank you.
It shouldn't be anything scary.
I've noticed that being in person is much better and much different than doing it online. It's much harder to sell cold, in DMs and just cold outreach.
Yeah.
Going to conferences, going to events, showing up in person is it's I have a much better sort of success rate, in person than I do just cold outreach.
Well, I think it depends a lot on the product, but throughout my whole business life, I've always liked in person. I'm old enough that, there was no other way before. And so we flew to meetings and it was kind of considered normal. And I think it's coming back of course, there is a ticket size for which it makes sense, but it's coming back because it's everybody's trying to sell you through automated DMs and Zoom call. And so if somebody actually shows up in your office, it's kind of let's celebrate, let's have coffee, let's have lunch, let's talk.
Yeah.
So I think, it's coming back into forum that people actually show up if they mean it.
That's right.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm noticing the same thing.
So what conferences do you plan to be at? So
ETHConf in New York, I'll be at that. I'm going to go to the Stripe event in San Francisco, the Stripe Sessions event. Mm-hmm. I think it's at the might be at the end of April, the end of May, I can't remember. And then those I'm definitely going to. Token 2049, I'm kind of on the fence. I think that there was it sounded like maybe there was a delay or it was postponed or something, I can't remember. And then
one moment it sounded like it's not going to happen, which I think it will because it's too much money. But
so I'll go to either one or both of those, and then probably permissionless, I'd say. Those are the ones I'll probably definitely be at. Well, I will be at, and then whatever other events kind of pop up in between those. I think I've typically been pretty resistant to a lot of crypto conferences just because I think that they're like an excuse for people to pay, to use company money to go party and like not get a lot done. But I'm actually, I'm like slowly changing my mind on this because we've actually had a pretty good amount of success going to these events and interacting with people. So I see it as more of the ROI I think is higher than I maybe have given it credit for. So I'm starting to go to more.
Well, probably you have the right product, which is a good fit. It's like, it depends a lot, of course.
That's a big factor.
But it's true that, conferences these days can be either a good party, but with all the apps and ability to arrange meetings in advance and like the private dinners and private yachts, you can actually get a lot done if you want to.
Yes.
So yeah, right. I think it really depends how you approach it.
Yep.
Totally. Okay. Anything else you want to tell everybody? Otherwise, I'll point everybody to Spandex and
yeah, that's it. No, spandex.sh. If you want to improve your execution and you want to, own the library, it's free and open source. Go check it out.
Maybe one last question, Jonny, before you go. What's your favorite LLM coding agent? Which one do you use?
I kind of use them all, to be honest. I use Claude. I'd say Claude. My answer would be Claude. I use Claude the most. But I also use ChatGPT and I also use Grok. I just kind of use them for different things.
Yeah.
But Claude I use for work. I feel like the integrations that Claude has are very, very good. It's a good work tool for me. But it's funny, our team is everyone uses a different one.
Oh, really? Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I like Claude. I am still baffled by the fact that you can have like wonderful 10 days with the tool and then it just visibly degrades. You're still using the same model and everything. And it's just outputs are just horrible. You can't really use it.
We've noticed this too recently. Like actually this week, we were just complaining about this. Like we've had like this epic run where we've done all sorts of amazing things. But then like last week and this week, we've noticed like just massive degradation in
no idea, if it's engineered or it's just an accident, because nobody knows what's happening in those models anyway. But it's just annoying, right? We are so used to some like consistently improving stuff, not like this is great. And then like, oh my God, what happened?
Well, this is why it's important to still like know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah.
Like, especially for infrastructure stuff, like if it breaks, you like really need to know how to fix it by yourself, Yeah,
that's true.
And I feel like more and more like vibe coded things are just, it's like if there's an issue with the AI, you're screwed because the level of complexity is so high that, you can't go and fix it yourself. So that's something that we like kind of think about actually quite a bit, is ensuring that a human can make critical fixes if necessary.
Okay. I am not going to dig any deeper into technicalities around Spandex. You guys go and check it out yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here and for the story. I hope we will maybe, hear that you guys did your first billion in 2026 and that you are winning the game.
Oh man, the next time that we talk, I hope to have done at least 100 million in volume, on our way to 1 billion. So let's have that be the goal.
Let's have that be the goal. I think it's perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Jonny.
Thank you so much. Bye.